Hey nerdy knitters, welcome to another episode of the Nerdy Knitting Podcast. Get your favorite beverage, whether it's hot or cold, and you're knitting, and let's settle in for a good chat. So it's been a month since the last podcast. Of course, there's been other videos. We've settled into our new routine of just one video a week and alternating between tutorials and tips and pattern roundups and collections and our monthly now knitting podcast. So over the last month or so, I've always post questions and memes and polls over on the community tab, and maybe you've seen them when you're scrolling through YouTube. And two that we've had recently are about whether you have ever actually unraveled a whole project to reclaim the yarn. And quite a few people actually have. So if you want to click over and you can vote, and you can also see how other people reacted to that poll. And this last week's poll was about how you like to knit small things in the round. There are so many interesting ways to knit small circumferences in the round. There's double pointed needles, of course, and then there's also those flexible double pointed needles, and now we have shorty needles, and of course magic loop and two circulars, and then there's also traveling loop, which I sort of put in with magic loop because you need a long circular needle cable for that. I think I haven't used that method very much, but all these different ways to knit small things in the round, and I'm just curious to know about your favorite way to knit them, whether that's socks or baby items or even the sleeves on a sweater, what you like to use when you're knitting those small things in the round. So you can find the link down below and pop on over and answer that poll and see what everybody else has to say too. So I've been working through the Professional Knitwear Designer course through the Knitting Guild Association. They have their other programs like the Master Hand Knitting Program and the Professional Knitting Program. I think that's what it's called. I'm not sure. I think it is. Those who don't want to do like the full-on master's program but want to improve their skills, that's the other course. And they've even got, certification for technical editing, for teaching knitting, even for judging at fairs. I think I might like to try that course too. I've done almost all of them now, all of these courses. Not quite. I haven't done the professional knitting course. I'm waiting for my master's level 3 to come back, and then that will be done. But while I'm waiting on that, I've been working on the design course because I would like to get more into garment design, and I need a little more learning in that area, I guess. There's a lot I don't know. Of course, I can knit and design a sweater in one size, but there's all of what they call grading when you have to create the pattern for multiple sizes. And now a lot of patterns come in up to 9 sizes, and it's not just a matter of casting on extra stitches. There's a lot of other things you have to consider as you're designing those other sizes for the garments, and not just like the one sample size that you're knitting, whatever size that might be. And I'm trying to learn all of those things, and there's lots of other things to learn as well. So it's 3 modules this course, and I've just submitted my first module and I just got my feedback, and most everything was just fine. There's a report you have to do and some questions you have to answer, and not just yes or no, like very detailed. Like you just have to, like it might have a list of terms you have to define, or it might want you to discuss the pros and cons of a certain type of knitting technique. And then there's also a book review on a specific knitwear design book. And then you have what you would call a design proposal. A lot of different places like yarn companies or magazines will publish these submission calls where they will say you have this certain date you have to submit your idea by, and they have their list of criteria. You have to include like information about the design, a sketch of the design, a swatch of the stitch patterns, how much yarn you're going to need for this, the sample you're going to knit, all of this information, and how to put that together in a proper submission. And of course, anybody can submit design ideas. They probably get a lot of submissions, and they have to sift through all them and choose the ones. And there's generally like a certain theme or a mood that they're going for. So you want to try to fit your design to fit that mood or design or theme or whatever that they're going for. But it's a big learning curve. There's lots to learn how to, like, either you sketch by hand or sketch on your iPad or the swatching, and how to put all these things together in a document that you can turn into a PDF. There's a lot to figure out and learn, and you don't need to take a course to do it, but you sort of don't know what you don't know, and you can sort of stumble along in the dark and figure things out. And I have been doing that up to now with the designs that I have submitted in different places, but I'd like to refine my experience, I guess, and uncover those things that I'm not quite sure about, and just create things that are a little more professional, just even the submissions themselves. So I just got my feedback anyway for Module 1, and my reports and my book review and my questions, all of that is absolutely fine. My only thing that I have to resubmit is this design call. What the course does is, and the teacher is Donna Eston. She's a designer. I'm going to link to her Instagram if I remember down below. And she's a fabulous instructor. You have everything you need just emailed to you. Then you can email her if you have any questions, and you work through the module, and then you email all the files to her, all your completed work. And she reviews it and gives you great feedback. I got feedback on like my reports and my questions, and she really goes through everything and adds even more tips, that things I hadn't thought of before. So the design submission is really like the culmination of everything you've learned in this first module, and it's sort of like a fake design call. She uses one that was published in the past for Interweave Knits, and you're just using that as sort of like your sample, like if you were going to submit to this design call, how would you do it? And you have to design a specific garment and include all of the things that you need in this submission. And I think I did okay on it. There's a lot of work. You have to do the sketching and the swatching and like writing about the design, and you really have to think through it. Even though you might never actually knit this thing, it's just like it's a potential thing that you could do. So you're going to lay it out just like you were planning to. So how much yarn you're going to need to knit the sample, you've got to do a lot of work just for this 1-page submission. So I still have things I've got to work on that, some things that I need to improve. So I've got to redo that. Hopefully I'll get that done this week, and then I can resubmit that and then start module 2, which is quite a big module, and it really focuses on the areas that I need to work on, like the pattern grading and creating schematics and all of those elements in a really professional, polished knitting pattern. So work-wise, that's coming right along, and that's the only thing on my plate besides lots of design submissions, but we'll talk about those in a bit. But before we get to the knitting, I always like to talk about a book that I'm reading, and this week's discussion is about the Mary Russell and Sherlock Holmes series. I'm not sure if I've discussed them in the past, but I want to bring them up again. I'm reading the very last, or I just finished it actually last night, the very last, I think it's book number 17, Castle Shade is the title. The first book is The Beekeeper's Apprentice. There's 17 books in the series, but then they have some of those short stories that are like, in between books, the 5.5 or whatever. There's a lot of those too. I haven't read any of those. I might go back and do that now that I finished the main series. But the book is about Mary Russell. I think she's about maybe 15 or so, some 15 to 17. I can't quite remember off the top of my head. She is an orphan who she grew up in the States, but now she is living in England. That's where her family was from originally, I believe. So she's living with an aunt there, and it's the Sussex countryside. I think it's when Sherlock Holmes has retired from his investigative career, and he's in the country, and he is taking care of bees and just living in the country with Mrs. Hudson. She's still his housekeeper. And Mary Russell encounters Sherlock Holmes, and he discovers that she is very inquisitive and very intelligent, and he decides to take her on as an apprentice. And so the whole series is about that and their adventures together. Mary Russell is her name, and of course Sherlock Holmes. So the first book is The Beekeeper's Apprentice, which is a great introduction to the characters, and I've just finished number 17, which was a really good story. It takes place in Romania. And sort of like vampire-ish. It's Castle Bran, and we've got Transylvania, and a mystery surrounding the queen at the time, Queen Marie, who is Queen Victoria's granddaughter. And just it was a good mystery story. The whole series has been. There's some I've liked more than others, and with 17 books, that is definitely bound to happen. But if you like a good historical mystery series, then this series might be something worth checking out. So the first one is called The Beekeeper's Apprentice. Now you might have noticed some changes here over the past month. I've sort of changed things around and it slowed things down. We're just down to one video a week at the moment, and that seems to be a really good pace. I'm not feeling too burnt out with that. Just one video, sit down and pop my phone on or my webcam, which is what I'm using today, and chat with you. But I think it was in the reclaiming the yarn video where I took a whole sweater apart to reclaim the yarn to knit something new. And I talked about going to the secondhand store to look at sweaters at the secondhand store to show you what to look for. Well, I did go, and I didn't even think about that, but right now, at least at my secondhand store, the one that's closest to me, I should go check another one too maybe, but the one I went to, they don't actually have any sweaters on display right now because of course it's almost summer and it's mostly t-shirts and shorts and lighter garments, so there's no sweaters that I can actually look at to show you what to look for. So that's sort of on pause until fall when there might be some sweaters, and then I will definitely go in with my phone. I had my little tripod, a handheld tripod to put my phone on because it's really shaky trying to hold my phone and look at sweaters at the same time. And my husband was like, okay, I'm just going to sit in the car. I don't want to go in with you if you're going to be recording in there. I'm like, I'm not going to be recording my face. I'm just going to show these sweaters and like the seams and what to look for. But he just laughed. He thought that was really funny. But we will do that. We'll just have to wait until fall when there are actually some sweaters to look at the secondhand store, and then we'll talk about what to look for when you want to reclaim yarn. It's a great way to find really good fibers really inexpensively. I found 100% cashmere sweaters, 100% wool. I think that's all I've ever reclaimed is just wool and the one cashmere. I haven't really bothered with cotton because cotton's not as expensive as some other fibers. It's fairly inexpensive, so it's a lot of work. That's the one thing you'll want to be aware of. It really is a lot of work to pull a sweater apart, and it's helpful to have at least a ball winder, maybe even a Swift, but that's not quite as important. But a ball winder really is a good thing to have. But anyway, just for those who were wondering about where that video is, it's going to be on hold until I can find sweaters at the secondhand store. Now, before we actually get into what's been on my knitting needles for the past month, I just want to share about this month's sponsor, which is Knit Picks. They're having their huge summer sale. If you like to wait and buy yarn during the sale season, then right now is the time to buy at Knit Picks. I'll have a link down below for them. You can go check out the sale. Basically everything, I think all of the yarn is on sale up to 60% off. Not all of them are 60% off, but it's up to 60% off. So really great deals. I just ordered some actually, and it should hopefully be here by the end of the week. So you'll have to wait till the next episode to see what I ordered. But basically I've been submitting more design calls, and you need to swatch for all of those, and it's good to swatch in at least the same sort of fibers that you'd like to use and the same yarn weight. To get a good idea of how much yarn you're going to need, and that takes yarn, and so I wanted to have more variety on hand. I knit with a lot of wool, mostly in sport and worsted weight, and of course like sock yarn, but I want to design in different fibers and in different yarn weights, so that's what I ordered this week. I just went through and ordered like the Cotton yarn. I think that's a fingering yarn, and I just ordered lots of different fibers and lots of different yarn weights so I could have a variety of yarn on hand for those swatches. And it's really kind of fun. I usually don't buy yarn unless I have a particular project in mind. So it was really fun just to like, hey, let's just buy yarn. I have no project in mind. I had about $50 I wanted to spend on yarn, and so yeah, I just went during the sale and I just picked random skeins of yarn in light colors and just filled up my shopping cart online, and hopefully that yarn will be here this week so I can squish it around and start swatching for even more new designs. Since it's been a month since the last podcast, I feel like I have quite a lot to share. When we were doing this every week, it didn't feel like I was making very much progress in those weekly videos, but I feel like I've got quite a lot this month since we've moved to this monthly thing. But first of all is the cardigan that I'm knitting for my daughter. You can see it right behind me. I still have not added the buttons, and I still have not added the pockets. It's been sitting there now for a month. So I'm going to sit down probably next week, and this might be my video for next week. I'm going to make a list of all the things I'd like to finish up over the summer, maybe through September. We'll say quarterly up through the July, August, and September. That sounds good. I'm going to write it all down and then sort of decide how to get it all done, because this is where sometimes the knitting is the fun part. I don't even mind the sewing up. That was fine too. But then like I've got to put the buttons on and add the pockets and just those finishing things. Sometimes that's where I seem to get stuck and things just sort of hang around and don't get finished. So I'm going to pull everything out and get them all finished up hopefully this summer. I've got a few things that the knitting is done, but it's the finishing part, and this sweater is one of them. It's been sitting there now over a month. It's been done maybe 2 months now where I've got the sweater actually finished, all sewn up, but it just needs buttons, and my daughter wants pockets on it as well. So this is using the Brava sport weight yarn from Knit Picks, and I think this is my last skein. I actually knit another project with the same yarn because I really overestimated how much yarn I was going to need, which is fine. I'll use it for something else. But this is 340 yards of acrylic yarn. It's machine washable and dryable. It's really a nice soft acrylic. I did start to notice when it was warm, when I was knitting, that I start to feel clammy when I get hot and I'm using an acrylic or wearing something that's acrylic. It feels a bit clammy on my skin, and I did tend to notice that when I was finishing up the sweater and I had the whole weight of the sweater on my lap, and it was like a warm day. We had some warm days back in April. But other than that, it's been great to work with, really soft, not scratchy at all. It does have a little tendency to pill a bit, but most acrylics do already. But good yarn, very inexpensive, so I don't mind that I purchased too much because I will just use it for something else. And the sweater, the cardigan, is from Amy Herzog's Ultimate Sweater book. This book is, if you're familiar with Ann Budd's books, her handy book of sweater patterns or anything like that, this is very similar. I would say this is more updated and modern looking, like the silhouettes are more modern. But she has all of the basic garment construction, like yoke sweaters, set and sleeve, drop shoulder, and raglans. And then they are all in 3 different yarn weights or gauges. So like probably maybe a fingering or a sported DK and a worsted. And also each one of those garment shapes, it will have a pullover sweater and a cardigan. So you got all of those, however many that would be, 4 different construction methods, sweater, cardigan, 3 different yarn weights, and then each of them is in 12 different sizes. So it's actually, I would think, if you're an adventurous knitter and you don't want to keep buying a lot of patterns, buy one book and you could knit all of the sweaters you want. So all of those basic patterns are very plain, just stockinette, some ribbing, but then she walks you through how to add different things like shawl collars, pockets, stitch patterns, or even how to design your own without using her numbers, like how to use your own calculations and your own measurements to design a really custom fit sweater. And then there are also a bunch of designs in the book that shows how she uses those basic patterns and adds stitch patterns, changes the shaping, and just all the things that you can do to create different designs. You can see some of them right here. So anyway, really good book. I really like this book. I think it's worth owning if you want to have a whole wide variety of patterns that you can customize, or if you want to learn how to take proper measurements and really design for a custom sweater for yourself. But I'm using the basic cardigan set and sleeve construction, and I think this one, yeah, it did come in a sport weight yarn, okay. But I don't think my gauge was quite the same as hers, but even that, like I used my own gauge to figure out like the bust measurement that I needed for the finished sweater, and then I used that to figure out how many stitches I would need. And then I just used one that was the closest to that, and the sweater fits really great. It looks really good. So it's this basic sweater, but of course the collar is different. I skipped this collar and did a shawl collar instead, which is not that hard to do. You have to use short rows, of course, but you start down at one point and then you work up around, you pick up your stitches, and then you start building up along the back collar, and you go back and forth, longer and longer to get that really wide shawl collar. Just short rows and deciding how tall you want that collar to be, and that will tell you how many short rows you have to do. Not hard to figure out. It was actually pretty simple as long as you're okay with doing short rows, which you just pick whichever method you like, and you have to know your gauge, and it's not hard. I think I'm gonna have to do a whole video on how to do that, because you could add a shawl collar to any cardigan as long as it's a V-neck cardigan. That's sort of like the foundation for a shawl collar. You need that V-neck shaping, but you could switch out any button band on any V-neck cardigan and turn it into a shawl collar if you wanted to, I think. Don't quote me on that. There's probably an instance somewhere where that wouldn't quite work, but any basic cardigan with a V-neck, yeah, you could add a shawl collar. But anyway, so the sweater itself is done. We've got the buttons all purchased, and they are in a box over here on my desk, and I just need to get the buttons sewn on. And she wants patch pockets in the front, so I'm either going to knit them separately and then sew them on, or I might pick up stitches and knit them directly on. I'm leaning towards that. I think I might go in that direction, picking up where the pocket will go and then just knitting it directly on. And then I'm not having to do any sewing. It will be pretty much finished. But the only downside to that is like you're holding a whole sweater in your lap while you're putting this pocket on. And it's summer and I really don't want to have a whole sweater in my lap. That's the advantage of doing the pocket separately, I suppose, is you've only got the little pocket to knit. But good progress. I mean, well, not any good progress actually. It's been done for a while, except for those finishing details. So I'm going to have to make a list and put that on my list of things to finish. So speaking of this yarn, which I have had quite a bit of left, I asked her if she wanted anything else. I don't really wear brown so much. She chose this color. So we looked at some different patterns. She didn't really want any scarves or mittens or anything like that. But we settled on a vest, like a sort of a small waistcoat that is more form-fitting. And I'll put a picture here of the design. It's a drops design, the one we chose. I think it's the first time I've ever knit a drops pattern. It wasn't that hard. They are kind of brief on instructions and you have to decipher things, but it wasn't super difficult. But there was a lot going on. I'll show you that in a second. But the garment itself was not that difficult. Basic stitch pattern. There's the back right there. It's just stockinette with like this pearl ridge texture. Garter stitch along the edges. Very simple. I want to say that the pattern did have you, like it explains, oh yes it did, it explained how to do the left front and then the instructions for the right were like reverse everything. So you have to you have to figure that out, which wasn't too difficult, but did make me pause and think for a while. And there's one of the fronts, and even the button band is integrated right into it, which is on the right side. So, but by the time you finish the back and the left, you've got a good idea of what you're doing, so it's not so bad. So there's the front, and it's got like this, this decrease worked right here. So you get what looks like a seam, like you would see in a really fitted garment that's not knit, like just a sewn garment. You'd often see like a princess seam or something along the waistline. So you get that effect in this too. So of course I've got some finishing to do here. My pieces are done, but they need to be sewn together. I need to find some buttons. But the pieces are finished. What's really fun about this though is for the fronts especially. So you've got the stitch pattern, which isn't that hard. It's just a 4-row repeat. It's just stockinette, and then 1 row you are knitting on the back to get that ridge. And you've got garter stitch going on for your edges at the same time. And then you've got a lot of, that's the thing, nothing is very difficult, but there's a lot of things going on all at once. So you've got your stitch pattern that you have to maintain. You've got your garter stitch edge. You got to maintain one stockinette stitch on this side because that's where you're going to seam the garment. You want to remember to put your buttonholes evenly spaced, and then you've got this decrease line that you have to work in the middle to get that shaping, and then you're also increasing along this edge to shape the garment itself. So all of these things at once. So every row I would have to stop and think, okay, what's happening on this row? Am I having to do this middle increase? Am I having to increase along the edge? Just so much. Am I supposed to make a buttonhole right now? Like, it was that the last piece, and of course also they don't give you any instructions for the right side. They just say reverse everything from the left. So you've got to figure all that out as well. So the last piece, the right one, was probably the hardest because you've got the buttonholes and the shaping and the garment construction, and you're reversing everything that you did on the left. So nothing was particularly difficult. It's just that there were so many things going on at once that it was a bit nuts at times. But it is all done now. I'm hoping it fits her all right. We shall see. It's supposed to be a bit form-fitting, but she's larger busted, like her mom. So sometimes things are a bit too tight. But I'm thinking if that happens, I can just do I can take the side seams apart and just add like a garter stitch band along the sides to give it a little extra width. But we're gonna sew it up and we'll see. She might want that tight fit because it is supposed to be something, you know, like a vest waistcoat thing, or usually more. There's maybe no positive ease, maybe even a little negative ease. So hopefully it will fit her okay. But if not, I think it would be easy enough to undo the sides and add like a little garter stitch panel in there that can add a little more stretch. But actually a pretty fun pattern, and I really like the basic shape. I really like that decrease line in the middle. I just think it looks really nice on there, but you'll have to see it when it's finished, I guess, because it's hard to see what's going on with that right now. And I still have more of this yarn left. Not quite as much now, thank goodness, out of the no hole waistcoat. I've got this skein and probably some odds and ends from this garment in the bag that I use, the project bag. So I'm not sure. I'll probably just toss it in my swatch box and save it. I don't really use a ton of acrylic for designing though, so I'm not quite sure. And I don't wear brown. So maybe I will just knit up some mittens and hats or something. And I do have like a box of things that I've knit, but it's more like a gift box. I save it, and then if there's somebody I want to give a gift to or something, I can go through my box and see what hand knits I have in there. So maybe I'll just knit up some stuff with it and just put it in there. Because it's nice to have stuff on hand as gifts. And sometimes I want to knit something, but I might want to explore that construction method, or if there's a certain yarn I want to try, but I might not actually want to keep the knitted thing. Then that's usually what ends up in the box, like things that I want to knit, but I don't necessarily want to keep for myself. So, but it's nice to have gifts like that on hand and ready to go. So you always have, you know, something for somebody's birthday or something like that. So perhaps, and acrylic is always great because it's machine washable and dryable. So it works great for those gifts where you know the person is not going to want to like hand wash and lay flat to dry. So I will have to figure out what to do with that yarn too. I like to keep a knitting project in my purse for on the go, like appointments or when I'm at church. I like to have something small that I can knit in church. And recently that has been dishcloths. I grabbed some dishcloth yarn and some needles and been knitting round dishcloths, and I got one done. Just need to sew this one up too. I've got a lot of finishing to do. But really, this pattern's really simple. I've already cast on another one. Get it out of my bag here. I'm halfway through with another one. This is, I think it's Knit Picks Dishie. They're cotton yarn for dishcloths. And this bag goodness, sometimes whatever works, right? When we bought new sheets for the bed, they came in like this little pouch. And I'm like, that's the perfect size just to toss my knitting in and throw in my purse. So I've got a couple of these, and I use them for small projects. So whatever you find that works, right? So that's a project bag, even though my sheets came in it. But before I was working on that dishcloth, and I'll put a pattern or a link to the pattern down below. It's really simple, round dishcloth. Once you've done a few, then you start to remember how it works, and you just have to think, how many do I cast on? And then after that, it's really simple. But before that, the thing that I kept in my bag were, I still have one of my needles actually, knitted knockers. Because they're small, they're also very easy to knit. And I've got a whole bunch of them finished though, so I need to get them finished and woven in. and drop them off. One of the yarn stores here in the city near me collects them and then sends them all into the Canadian branch of the company. So if you're not aware, knitted knockers are basically just hand knit prosthetics for women who have had mastectomies after going through breast cancer treatments. So they have specific yarns they like you to use and a specific pattern that you follow, and you don't even have to stuff them. You just knit the pieces and weave in your ends. Actually, I don't think you even weave in the outside one of the ends, because then they stuff them and they can close them up. But and usually you can mail them right into the organization. There's an American branch and there's also a Canadian branch. Or check with like your local yarn store, because they might be a drop-off point, and that's what I do. I knit a bunch of them. I have a whole stack. I really need to take them in after I get them all finished, of course, and just drop them off, and then when they have enough or whatever, they mail them all in together. So it's a great organization if you like to do any sort of charity knitting, and that's what I was doing. It was my church knitting. When I'd go to church every week, I would work on these, and I would often get questions about what they were, and that's something, I would tell people, and I mean, people don't know, that you can hand knit things like that, but it's made for a lot of interesting conversations when people would ask what I was knitting. But I've knit so many of them now, and I've got a pile I have to take in, so I thought I would take a break from that, just work on some dishcloths. I think for Christmas gifts this year, a lot of like my lady friends at church or whatever, or the families, I might just knock out a whole bunch of dishcloths and then just, pair a few of them with some, a bottle of scented hand wash or a pretty soap or something like that, and just hand them out to ladies at church. I like to have small gifts like that at Christmas time. I've done cinnamon rolls in the past. I would make like giant batches of cinnamon rolls, but we have really cut back on the amount of sugar we eat, and I know a lot of other people have too, so I don't like to I'm trying to veer away from all of the sugary sweets and do other things instead. And I love my hand knit dishcloths. I use them. They're the only thing I use to wash dishes. I made some, when I first made some for my mother-in-law, the round ones, I made her some of the round ones. She did not want to use them. She wanted to use them as like doilies instead. I'm like, no, you're supposed to wash your dishes with these. And she does now, but at first she didn't want to because she thought they were too pretty. But I think they're a pretty gift, but they're a practical gift as well. So I might make some more of those and hand them out this year at Christmas. And I also have one more thing off my needles, but I actually can't show it to you because I didn't get the yarn, or the project is in the mail. Anyway, it was something I designed for the upcoming issue of Cast On, so it will be in the magazine, but I have just mailed it off to be photographed for the magazine, so I don't have it here to show you. I do have the yarn though. This is Tanis Fiber Arts. It's Willow yarn. It's a blend of silk and linen. Beautiful yarn. Really soft and lovely to work with. So I knit a lace scarf with it, it's got a ruffle on one edge. You cast on a lot of stitches, work a few rows, and then you decrease away, like all of them away, like by 2/3. You're getting rid of 2/3 of the stitches. So you get this really cute ruffle, and then it's this charted lace design with a leaf lace and some other twisted stitches and lots of different stitches that you do to create this scarf, and then you just knit it as long as you want it. And then you finish with another ruffle on the other edge by increasing a lot of stitches all at once. So I don't have it to show because I got the yarn, I knit the whole thing, and I mailed it off between the last episode and this one. So, and I completely forgot to take a picture of it too. I meant to and then didn't even think of it, but that I can show you the yarn at least. So this is Willow. It's wonderful fingering weight, light fingering weight yarn for, I would say, shawls. It's great for shawls, summer weight things. It'd be great for a summer weight garment as well. But it's funny, I can tell you about this project, but I can't show it to you. But that's also off my needles. Now, the last few things are stacks of swatches, because I have been on a submission kick. I've seen lots of places to submit for new design calls. So I've just been, every time I see one, I'm like, okay, let's just submit something. And my goal is whenever I see one that I think I could design for, then create some kind of design and submit it. I just want to get more practice creating Just even submitting the submission itself, even if it's not accepted, most of the time it's not. I would estimate that maybe 1 out of every 3 things I submit actually gets accepted. I'd like to see that maybe rise a little bit, maybe a 50-50 chance instead of just as little as it is. But on the plus side, every time I create one, if it's rejected from one place, then I can always submit it somewhere else. I can, change like who it's for, change maybe some of the details, but if it fits another theme for another submission from another yarn company or another magazine, then I can always resubmit it. So it's not like the work is wasted. And right now it's more like I'm getting more experience creating these submission forms. So anyway, it's been good experience. And well, the first one I wanted to show is the one that was for my my fake submission for my course, for the professional knitwear design course. One of the projects is to use specific parameters and a specific theme to come up with a submission, something that you would design. So I came up with this idea for a sweater, a simple cropped drop shoulder, not too oversized, the body of the sweater. So I did a swatch for that with like a high crew neck. Even the bottom, I even did, it's got a folded hem. And that is like my little swatch for the actual sweater itself, what that would look like. And then the sleeves are where all of the fun is with, so you would knit the body from the bottom up in the round, and then you would divide at the armholes and knit the front and back separately. Do a 3 needle bind off to join them together. Like, you're doing all of this, thinking this through, even though you might not actually ever knit the thing. You're doing all this work to come up with a design. And then you would pick up stitches for the sleeves and knit them in the round. And I wanted to do that specifically because it's using stranded color work. And I don't like to do stranded color work flat. I hate to do the purl side rows. I'd rather do it in the round. So that really helped me decide on the construction method. I wanted to be able to pick up the stitches, and there's no shaping. So the sleeves are completely straight. And when you have no shaping on a sleeve and it's just like straight down from the arm, it ends up looking almost like a bell shape, even though it's straight, because you need the extra width at your arm, your bicep, but you don't need all that width at your wrist. But by leaving it completely straight, it looks like it's bigger around the wrist than it is. But I also, because I like the idea of like dramatic sleeves, I guess, in this design. So it just has this really chevron inspired design. It's not quite a chevron, it's offset, but I wanted all of the drama to be in these oversized sleeves. So the body itself is like just this cropped sweater, close fitting, high neck, but then you've got these really dramatic sleeves. So it was a sort of for a fake submission, just from the course, but it's growing on me, and I think I might actually want to design this garment. But right now it's the grading that's holding me back. I could definitely like take measurements and figure this out for one size, but then when you've got to figure it out for 9 different sizes, that's a different ball game altogether. So that's what's holding me back right now. And of course, I mean, unless somebody like a yarn company or a magazine has this specific theme in mind where they want something, like this, then it wouldn't really fit. But I like the idea, and I think I might actually do something with that design later on. And then another one that I was working on, it was for that class as well. Before I read the instructions and realized they wanted a very specific garment, and I was thinking more of a hat, which was not the garment in mind. So I had this stitch pattern, which I really liked. I thought it was really fun. It looks kind of like a candy cane now that I'm looking at it. But I started with, I wanted like that contrast color at the brim. But what I did was the alternate cable cast on. And then I switched to the neutral color. And the more I look at it, the more it looks like a provisional cast on that you're supposed to pull out, which I don't like. I think it's just because it's so thick. If I'd done like just maybe a long tail cast on even, it would have been just a very thin line instead of this really thick line along the bottom. So then I folded it over, and I'm like, oh, I like that, where it just looks like a folded brim. So we'll go with that instead. And then So this one I have submitted to another magazine for their winter issue, but I just like this stranded color work because it's double warm, and then if you make a long brim and fold it over, get a nice warm hat. So this is another potential design. We'll see how that works, but I just liked the stranded design on this too, this really fun color. But yes, now I'm looking at it, it looks a lot like a candy cane or something. So maybe it should be a Christmas hat. I don't know. And then I have two more designs I've been working on, just in the swatching stage. One of them, it was for, they wanted the summer issue for a magazine next year, and they wanted like summer, they had a certain like theme around it, and thinking, okay, I want to try knitting a garment and doing the sizing, but it's got to be really simple. So I went with like the simplest of all, which is when you have the two squares that you knit and then you sew together like along the shoulders and along the sides. I'm like, I can do that. It's just two squares. I can figure that out for all those different sizes. So this was my swatch for that idea. So this is basically like a mini sweater. This would be your hem down here, and then this is your stitch pattern for the whole length of the sweater, and then right to the neckline. And we don't even do like any shaping for the neck. Oops. And we just bind it off, and then you do the same for the back, and then you just sew it right here for your shoulders, and then leave space for your arms and seam down there. So that was my swatch for that. They wanted simple construction, and you can't get any simpler than just two big squares that you knit together for your body, for your sweater. But that's simple enough that I don't think the grading is going to be that hard. There's absolutely no shaping, just this really fun little simple stitch patterns, just stockinette, these eyelet ridges, and then this little popcorn lace. It looks like little pieces of popcorn to me. So we'll see how that one does. I kind of like that one. I want to knit that one, I think. That looks fun for summer. And then one more design call for socks. So I'm like, well, why don't I just knit the whole little tiny sock? And I cast on, I don't remember like how many stitches it was. I started with a ruffle and some stripes, and there is a bit of texture on the foot of the sock itself, but I'm not sure if I want to keep that or not. But anyway, so that's the one I'm working on right now. It's still a bit damp because it was just soaking. But yellow and pink, that's a really bright sock, but kind of like it. So I think I might submit this as well. So that's all the submissions I've been working on. Lots of stuff, goodness. But hopefully some of those I will get a positive, and I can start knitting them for those publications. And if not, then the submissions are ready to submit in other places. Now, we spoke about reclaiming yarn, and I did that with a sweater that I knit last year in a cotton hemp yarn. The garment didn't have any seams for structure, and it had a very open neckline, and from the weight of the garment it just kept growing and growing. It just was not the right pattern for the yarn. Pattern was great, I just didn't choose the right yarn. So I took that sweater all apart, and I got a whole video about how I did that, so I'll link that down below too. And I'm actually almost finished with my new sweater, and this one does have seams. Not a sweater, it's a tank top. It's the Sayer pattern by Hoover for Pearl Soho. It's just an A-line tank top, very simple stockinette. What I liked about it is that it has seams for structure, and it has two different necklines, and it's reversible, so you can decide which neckline you want to be the right side of your garment. So I finished like the crew neck side, and that's all finished. Nice A-line drapey shaping. I made it a bit on the long side, which I like with some of my short leggings that I wear. And I'm working on the V-neck side. I've finished one side of the V-neck shaping. Oops, try not to lose my stitches. And then I still have the other side to go. My only concern is it's looking a little long in the armhole, but maybe not. I don't know. I'll seam it up and then I'll see. It does look a bit long. Then I'll see. But if it is, then all I have to do is take out the shoulder seams and then just pull them back a little bit and shorten it up. But we'll see how it looks. But yes, just the one side left to finish. So that shouldn't take me more than the rest of the week. And then I've got that to sew up and do the finishing on as well. So I don't have anything else on my needles right now. I've got everything, like this pile of things that need to be finished. So I think the next month or so is going to be like finishing up all of those projects, but it should be done fairly soon. And then it's not even July yet. So I've got the summer to enjoy it and wear it. So this is Peyton's Hemster yarn. I don't know, I think it might have been discontinued actually, but I don't think, it wasn't really meant for garments, but I wanted to try it out. It does have a heavy feel to it, but I'm hoping that repeated washings, it might act like linen and relax a little. We'll see. If it doesn't, then there's nothing wrong with ripping it out again and using it for something else. But I could make a lot of market bags with all of this yarn. But we'll see. We'll at least wear it this summer and see what we think. But I don't mind tearing things out and using the yarn again if I don't like something. I just get to do more knitting without actually having to spend more money on more yarn. And that's all I've been knitting recently. My swatching is done. I've got one more thing to submit this week. There are 2 or 3 upcoming design calls that I'm going to probably swatch for those as well. I'm trying to really push myself to get more submissions out there and just get more practice. And the only way to do that is by actually creating the swatches and the designs. And it really is, I didn't know before this that just that part of knitwear design was so involved. Like there's so much to it, and it's a lot of work. It probably takes me a week to come up with one, like to finish it from start to finish, because you have to think about like what their theme is and what type of garment you'd like to knit, what you have experience with, what you think you can actually knit. Like, I mean, I could submit an idea for like some really intricate sweater, but knowing like I couldn't actually do that at this point, like for 9 different sizes, and I don't have the skills for that yet. So you have to think, can I actually do this thing that they want me to do, first of all? And then, yeah, you've got to like look at your stitch patterns, think about colors, and you have to have yarn for swatching, and they don't give that to you. You have to have it in your stash. And even this ones like that, a lot of the ones I've had accepted, when I knit the thing, I also send all of the leftover yarn as well. So, because my other thought was, I'd have all these leftovers that I could swatch with, but sometimes they want all of the leftovers, so you don't actually have any to swatch for your next thing. So you actually have to invest a little. So I just bought some yarn that I can specifically have on hand for swatching different yarn weights, different yarn fibers. So I could have that, but there's coming up with the design itself and then swatching for that design, maybe multiple swatches. Like for the sweater I showed you, I wanted to show what the body would look like, and then the sleeves. There's all of that. And then you actually have to sit down and estimate, well, you'd want to say like, these are the sizes that you could knit that for, or that you could have the pattern graded for. And then you have to figure out how much yarn you're going to need for your sample, which is a lot of math. You've got to like weigh your swatch and do the measurements, and it's math. It's a lot of math. And then of course you have to sketch the design. They want to see a sketch of it on a body. So even if you can't, like, you have to learn how to do this. My sketching is not great. It's very not good, but they want that in the proposal. So it's a lot of work just to get this proposal ready. And then your chances of it actually being accepted, I don't know how they choose, but I imagine they have. I mean, if they only want like say 10 to 12 garments or pieces in a particular call, and you imagine there's got to be hundreds of people sending in designs, because there's a lot of knitwear designers, then I mean there's a lot to choose from, and they're just not they don't actually select very many. So yeah, I guess 1 out of 3 is not bad when they are accepted. But it's, yeah, I didn't realize it was so much work to it. I enjoy it, but it's a lot of work. But that's everything that's on my needles. It's really funny. I don't have much. I finished a lot of things. They're all in the finishing stages now. And I've got all these swatches going on. I do have 2 projects coming up. One I have the yarn for. I just caked it up actually a couple weeks ago. It's been sitting there. I haven't done anything with it. So now that everything else is pretty much done, I'm probably going to do this next. This is for a hat that will be coming out in October. I'm self-publishing this one. This is Malabrigo Meisha. They're bulky weight yarn. It's a variegated yarn. I love this color. It's very pretty. The last year or 2 years ago, I can't remember, and I don't have it out with me, I released a cowl pattern. It was my first release. It's a free pattern on Knitty. I'll put a link down below. The Satura cowl, and I'm going to use the same design, and this time it's going to be a hat. So they won't be quite, well, the patterns will match, so you could have a matching cowl and a matching hat, but I'm using 2 different colors of yarn, so they're not so matchy-matchy. So we're going to have the Satura beanie, and that will be out in October. So I've got the yarn already and got it all caked up, and I just can't stop touching it because it's very soft, lovely yarn. Now it's a single ply yarn, really plush feeling. It's lovely. And I love their variegated colors. They just remind me of like watercolors, like a Monet painting or something. And the design uses, it's just basic. There's a mistake stitch rib for the cuff of the hat. And then it's basic stockinette, and it's got this really simple slip stitch pattern and a bit of cabling, if you want to call it that. It's really simple. But I like slip stitch patterns with variegated yarns because it just highlights the colors, I think, and I think it works really well with this. So that will be on my needles very soon. The design is part of the Malabrigo Quickies series. They are promoting designs that use one skein of their yarn, and this will be a one skein knitting project as well. But they've got a whole series of those. I'm going to link to their website, and you can see lots of patterns that use a single skein of Malabrigo yarn. Then I have another design. This one will be coming out in September. I don't have the yarn for it yet. I'm still waiting on that. It will be using Hudson and West, their Forge yarn, which is, I think, is Merino Corriedale. Yes, it's a worsted weight yarn. It's going to be a cable wrap, not very oversized, more close fitting, and then the option to like do a seam along one side so you could wear it like a poncho. We'll have like a bit of mistake stitch rib at the sides, and then a cable along each edge, and then like an overall cable fabric. And I'm really looking forward to knitting that one. I'm still waiting for the yarn for that though. So that one will be coming out in September. So I think we're going to call September Cable Month. We're going to talk about like tips and tricks for knitting cables. If you have any, I'd love to hear them, and then I can include them in that video. And then we'll have like a tutorial on, probably for the poncho wrap itself. I'll walk you through how to knit that. That will be one of our videos. And so I think, yes, September is going to be Cable Month. So I guess with the hat coming out in October, maybe that will be Hat Month. We shall see. But anyway, that's upcoming things that will be on my needles. But I think other than that, it'll be some more swatching for some more designs and finishing up all of these projects that are almost finished and off my needles, or just need seaming or buttons or simple things like that. It's going to be a lot of finishing coming up for me next month. So our last little bit is all about acquisitions, and my only yarn acquisition would have been this yarn. I don't have a whole skein to show you, just this last little bit of the Willow yarn from Tanis Fiber Arts. This is a silk and linen yarn, really lovely. This color I think is chartreuse, it's really lovely green. I really like it. And in that package, he even sent me some stitch markers. Let me see, I really like these tiny little ring markers, but they're all different shapes. I don't know if you can see those. There we go. Bunch of different little shapes in there. Oh, and a locking stitch marker. That wasn't in there. But that was a lovely little surprise in that bag. And I love, when I am designing, I like to find yarn companies that are in Canada, and even better is if they're sort of local in my province in Quebec, and Tanis Fiber Arts they are in Montreal, which is not that far away from me. So it's really nice to order yarn and have it come super quick when they're not very far away. So those are the only acquisitions. I've got more things coming. I've got all that yarn from Knit Picks that's on the way. Hopefully it'll be here by the end of the week, but you won't see that until the next podcast. And yarn coming for that wrap that will be coming out in September. And I do have 2 books to show you that I really like. Marie Green of Olive Knits. I don't know if you're familiar with her, but she, this book is about her experience. She runs, I think she still does knit along at least once a year, where you knit a sweater in 2 weeks. Yes. Where you just, I think she'd even done one in a weekend. Was it a weekend? She talks about, she did one. Yes, 4 days, a long weekend, taking a long weekend to finish a sweater. So that's what she does. She does a 4-day sweater knit along. And this is sort of like the inspiration for this book, Seamless Knit Sweaters in 2 weeks. Now there are 20 patterns in here, and they all have the same sort of construction, sort of like raglan set and sleeve style, top down in the round, seamless. Well, not necessarily in the round. Some of them are cardigan, so they would be knit flat, but they are top down, very simple construction. Okay, you can see one of the, like sort of the construction of it right here. So it starts at the top. You might not join in the round right away, depending on the neckline, and then don't know, is that showing? Oh, there we go. Is that better? There we go. So it might start, well, it starts at the top. You might not join in the round right away if you have like the neckline treatment to work, and then you just work in the round down the body and the sleeves. And lots of lovely designs in here. Really simple ones like that. And there were some, let me see. This one is great for summer, I think. Just really pretty, delicate, very simple design. So I think there's 20 patterns all together. Oh, I like this one too. This feels very beachy, summery. So Marie Green of Olive Knits. This is a really good book. And another one that I really like by her, the same sort of idea, is Knit Shawls and Wraps in 1 week. So really simple construction methods, but lots of fun stitch patterns. I really like the ones in here. And they run the gamut from like the asymmetrical triangle shawls. There's crescent shawls. I think there's some rectangular wraps in here as well. Yeah, I like that one. I think yeah, that's the one I knit this one. I really liked it. Just a simple like bandana cowl style. See if I can find, oh, there's another really pretty asymmetrical with some colors. So I think, did she do a knit along for this as well, maybe? I don't know. Let me see. No, it doesn't look like it, but she does like to do, like set a goal to, you know, set a goal for how long you're going to take to knit a certain thing. So I really like that idea. And you can see some more of the ones right here on the back. I just picked these up from my library, but I really like the shawl book. I might buy this one, but both by Marie Green. So if you like shawls, this is a great book for that. I have no idea how many are in here. 30, it says 30. Shawls, wraps, and cowls. 30 of them, different shapes and construction methods, and then 20 sweaters. And these all use the same construction method, top down, sort of a raglan set and sleeve style, but then very different sweaters. You can see some of them on the back right there too. So those would be on my recommended list this week. Now, just one announcement before we wrap up for today. I've released a new shawl pattern, the Color Adventure Shawl. You can find it for free on the latest issue of Knitty, their first fall 2022. 2022? Yeah, that's what year it is. I'll put a link for it down below. So this is a top-down triangle shawl. If you've watched any of the past podcasts, you've probably seen me talking about this. And I've got the other one up here, the asymmetrical version. It will be coming out soon as well. But for now, the top-down triangle is available. And this is intended to be used with a long color change yarn, not like a self-striping sock yarn, but really long color changes. And every time the color changes, you change stitch patterns. And there's 4 very basic stitch patterns: garter stitch, stockinette, some eyelets, and a very simple texture pattern. So when the color changes, you switch to a different one, and I walk you through each one and how that works. And then the final section is a larger section. It takes about 100 grams of yarn if you're using scrap yarn, and it has more texture and more eyelets and finishes with a picot bind off. So if you're looking for a new fun shawl pattern, I would say it's a pretty relaxing knit, just a basic top-down construction shape. very simple stitch patterns. If you're looking for something like that, then you can click right over. I'll put the link down below and go check out the Color Adventure shawl. And thank you for joining me for this episode of our new monthly take of the Nerdy Knitting podcast. And I'll put a playlist right here so you can catch up on past episodes, and I'll see you in the next video.